The woman was hauling timber up a stony rise. Nothing but rope, grit, and a stubborn will against the weight of it. Wind ran sharp across the ridge, cold enough to bite through leather. From his saddle, Miguel Torres watched the rope dig into her shoulder and the heel of her boot slip. Catch, slip again. That log was a two-man job on a good day. She kept dragging it anyway. He eased his horse down the slope. The place came into view by degrees. Half walls fitted from rough-cut pine. No roof. A crooked line of tools abandoned when light failed the night before. A lean tent sagged beside a smoke-starved fire. No neighbors. No mercy from the sky. Just a small claim of hope staked in lonely ground. She heard him before she turned. The hoofbeats told their story. One rider coming straight. She straightened, breath running shallow, chin lifted like she'd learned long ago that you face trouble standing up. She didn't reach for a weapon. She didn't run. She just looked at him as if she'd expected this meeting since sunrise. "Afternoon," Miguel said, stepping down. His voice carried easy and low, same as a man does when he means to calm a spooked horse. "Heavy work for one back." "Strangers don't owe me anything," she answered. Her hand stayed on the rope, not to surrender it, but like it could turn to a whip if needed. Miguel took in the walls, the angles, the way the crossbeam would fail if snow sat on it a single night. "Wind's turning," he said. "We'll see a storm inside 10 days, maybe less." "I'll be ready," she told him. He looked at her then, not past her. A pale seam ran from temple to jaw, thin as a blade's memory. Fire, he thought, an old pain. She felt his eyes find the scar and flinched like a reflex she hated. "I'm not much to look at," she murmured, more defense than apology, as if she'd said it so often the words had turned smooth. Miguel met her gaze and didn't blink. "Good," he said. "I'm hunting for truth, not shine. Out here winter eats pretty first." A change ran through her face that wasn't quite trust and wasn't fear. Maybe surprised that a kind word could wear work boots. "Why would you help me, Shochama?" she asked. "I'm tired of colored ribbons tied around lies," he said, and left it there. He came back at dawn with a mule, a sack of nails, and a saw that had been filed sharp the night before. The woman, she called herself Catalina Vega when he asked, stood in the tent's mouth with a blackened coffee pot and a cautious nod. He set the bag by the half wall and spoke plain. "Your joints need bracing," he said. "Snow will make fools of beams that ain't fit proper." They worked without talk until the sun cleared the pines. He measured, she marked, he sawed, she hammered. A rhythm took shape the way good music does, quiet, steady, sure. By noon, that wall stood straighter than a preacher on Sunday. "You set a tight line," he said when they stopped for water. "I taught myself after I buried my husband," she answered, handing him a dented tin cup. "Plenty of widows in town," he said, not prying so much as letting a door stay open if she wanted it. "Plenty of gossip, too." She stared into the weak fire. A merchant there decided I was his problem to solve. When I said no, tongues went to wagging. Curses. Witchcraft. The kind of stories that stick easier than truth. Miguel waited, quiet as rock and shade. "The blaze started during a quarrel," she said at last. "Lamp fell. Kerosene kissed the floorboards. I pulled for him. He shoved me back. I ran. He didn't." Her hand rose to the scar like it was a road sign she never meant to read again. "They gave him a hero's burial. Gave me a sentence made of whispers. So I bought this patch with what I had left. If loneliness is my partner, I'd rather pick the land than the town. The wind freshened as they set to again. Later, when the light went amber and the day grew thin, she poured coffee into 2 cracked cups and studied him over the rim. A ranch your size ought to have a lady keeping the front room, she said. It did, he told her. Isabella. Crowd loved her, pretty as fresh paint. Wanted town lamps and music every night. The quiet rubbed her wrong. The dirt did too. He paused, eyes on the far hills. We lost a baby, then we lost her trying for another. I love what she was, but near the end, we didn't much like each other. That truth has been a stone in my boot since the funeral. The week turned colder. Snow fell in soft rehearsals, then stopped, then fell again. They found a smoother cadence with the work. He lifted while she braced. She planed while he fit. Their breath showed in small white puffs that drifted away like thoughts they didn't dare say. Now and then she spoke of the man who had turned mean with drink, how grief had soured into temper, how a night of shouting had become a ruin that outlived the flames. He said little. He listened well. By late afternoon, the sky went the color of pewter. The air thinned and the smell of crushed ice slid down off the ridge. We should quit, he said, squinting into the west. That's not a flurry coming. That's something with teeth. You best ride, she told him. Trail will vanish by dark. Too late, numb, he said, knotting a canvas over the half-framed roof. No sense courting a broken neck. I'll stay. Her face smoothed out, empty of any answer. I've got 1 blanket, she said, simple as a ledger entry. We'll make do, he said. Fire will do the rest. Night came hard and loud. The canvas hummed under the snow load, and wind dragged around the corners like wolves testing a door. They sat by a young fire, shoulder to shoulder under the shared wool, not touching, sharing heat like old soldiers do. Catalina reached into her pack and drew out a book gone soft at the edges. You read? She asked. Enough to sign brands and feel foolish, huh? He said. I can teach if you've a mind for it. Now I do, he said, surprised at how easily those 2 words walked out. She opened to a marked place and let her voice lay a road through the room. Old words, a wife waiting on a sailor who had the whole world between them and home. The flames talked in their own language. Snow hissed against the tarp. Something in him, long starved, listened like it had never been fed. Sometime toward midnight, her head drifted to his shoulder. He went still, the way a man does when a sparrow chooses his hand, afraid to breathe, afraid to move, grateful for the weight. Dawn lifted slow. Catalina stirred, realized where she rested, met his eyes, didn't pull away. Then his gaze slid past the open doorway frame to the world beyond, and the ease left his face. He rose without a word and stepped into the blue morning. In the new snow, a ring of hoofprints circled the cabin like a drawn noose. Someone had been out there in the teeth of the storm, walking judgment around their walls. Miguel studied the circles stamped in the pale crust, leaning close where the wind hadn't chewed the edges. The tracks were fresh, the kind that hold a boot print from the last hour, not the last day. 1 horse, maybe 2, if you counted the split where the animal danced in place. Friend of yours? He asked without looking up. I sleep lighter than a cat, Catalina said. Didn't hear a thing. That means they came when the wind roared loudest. He straightened, a careful kind of coward. She didn't answer. The book still lay where she'd set it, a strip of blue cloth marking the page. She closed it and slipped it back into her bag as if tucking away a small lamp before walking into a storm. They ate in a hurry, corn cakes scorched on a griddle, coffee black enough to argue, then set to work with the quiet that comes when folks agree on trouble without naming it. He sank new posts by the north wall, deeper than reason, and she shoveled the spoil while frost crept over her brides. Every few minutes he checked the ridge, a habit born from range wars and restless nights. Nothing moved but the sky. By noon, snow had stopped pretending and fell straight down, thick and slow. The world softened. Sound went short. They hammered braces across the joists and stretched the canvas tight, each knot cinched till the rope sang. When it was done, he stepped back and measured the roof with his eyes. "Won't win any ribbons," he said, "but it'll keep the bite off your bones." "Ribbons make poor shingle," she answered. He smiled at that. "You learn knots. You'll sleep easier." He cut a length of cord and showed her a bowline, then a clove hitch, then the one he'd used to hold calves for branding. She watched close, fingers repeating the turns, the tuck, the cinch. After a bit, her hands moved without her eyes, quick and sure, and she gave him a look that wasn't pride, exactly, but something kin to it. When the snow thickened again, they brought the work inside. He shaved door planks, true. She planed their edges so they'd sit without complaint. The play of the blade made a hush like distant rain. It felt like winter had pulled a quilt over the land and left them inside its warm square. Toward evening, Miguel saddled his horse and swung up with the ease of old habit. "You're leaving?" Catalina asked. "Just taking a look." He tapped the brim of his hat. "Tracks like that don't sit right in my head. I'll follow a piece and be back before the fire's tired." Now, he rode slow at first, then let the gelding stretch once he hit the flats. The prince kept to the trees and broke toward town. A mile on, the shape changed. Another set joined, smaller, shod lighter, the kind a clerk might ride when he wished to look bigger than he was. That sent a name through Miguel's mind like a draft under a door. He turned back before the light got mean and reached the cabin with a shake of snow from his coat. "Well," Catalina said without standing. She was laying spoons to dry on a rag, steam ghosting up from the pot where she'd boiled them clean as a surgeon. "2 riders," he said. "Little horse joined a bigger one. Trail slants toward Whitmore's store." Her jaw tightened, then settled. "He won't come out here with a rope," she said. "He'll use talk. A rope leaves marks, talk leaves none." Miguel fed wood to the stove and watched the flames take. "He'll find neither door open," he said, and meant it more than he planned. That night, the wind dropped. In the soft quiet, she read him the next chapter. He stumbled through a paragraph afterward, finding the sounds under her breath. When he missed a word, she waded him through it without 1 ounce of hurry. It did a strange thing to his chest, that waiting. He'd known plenty of patience from animals, some from children, little from grown folks. He didn't know he craved it until it was laid in his hands. Dawn pulled a band of pink across the far hills. They worked like farmers that day. Steady, forward, no fuss, till the door sat true and the hinges didn't groan. He hung a latch, smoothed splinters with a pocket knife, and tested the swing till it was right. When he was satisfied, he set the knife down and faced her square. "I'll be in town Sunday," he said. "Need salt, kerosene, a new bridle strap. If you want, I'll get you a better stoveplate and that window glass you pointed at. I'll come with you, she said just as square. You don't have to. I know, she said, I will anyway. He didn't push. A woman decides the roads she'll ride. Still, he felt pressure in his ribs at the thought of her walking down that street while every curtain leaned an ear. He saw Whitmore's polite smile, a white fence with nails in it. He saw Pritchard offering help that wasn't help. He saw the way cruelty could wear a church coat. The week inched by. They set rafters and tarred seams. He taught her to judge ice by sound. She taught him letters that liked to trade places if you blinked PBDQ until they stood where they should like hired hands who finally remembered their jobs. Once while trimming shingles, he asked about the scar without asking, just looked and waited. She spoke a few words and then no more. He didn't press. Some stories need two winners before they're told. On Saturday evening, he saddled the mule with sacks and left the horse for her. He's sure-footed in town, he said. Won't spook if someone slams a shutter. You trust me with him, she said, laying a palm to the gelding's neck. I trust your hands to ask instead of order. They turned in early. Snow had crusted to a bright skin that cracked underfoot like thin sugar. He woke before light and poked the fire. She was already up, braided neat, wearing a dark dress mended so cleanly you had to look twice to see where old ended and new began. She slipped her book into her bag and gathered her shawl. You don't owe them anything, he said, not sure if he meant the town, the gossip, or the ghosts in both. I owe myself a day of walking where I please. She met his eyes. And I intend to buy glass. They rode side by side along the frozen creek. Smoke rose from chimneys ahead. A bell began its measured call, slow and steady. Folks moved toward the church, black coats, gray shawls, boots squeaking on packed snow. Heads turned as the pair came in off the road, the way heads always do when a story rides past. Miguel touched his hat brim to a woman he knew. She looked at Catalina first, then at his hand, then away. Whitmore stood in his doorway in a tidy vest, polishing his spectacles with a square of linen that had never seen dirt. He smiled like a banker counting someone else's coins. "Morning, Mr. Torres," Whitmore called. "And Miss Vega, is it? Thought you'd decided to enjoy the peace of the outskirts." Catalina dismounted without answering. She tied the gelding to the hitching rail and faced the storefront. The bell kept ringing, slow and unbothered, as if it had never met a lie. "Looking for anything special?" Whitmore asked. "Or is this just a social visit?" Miguel felt the town draw closer, not with feet, but with ears. He also felt Catalina's shoulder blades square themselves under her shawl. He stepped forward before the first whispers found their shape. "Just supplies," he said, easy as he could make it. "I'm helping her with winter work, nothing more." He watched the words leave his mouth and wished he'd bitten them in two. Catalina's face didn't move, but the change in her eyes was small and sharp as a thorn. And then a voice from behind them said, "Well now, isn't that interesting?" And the crowd parted for a man whose smile never reached his eyes. Sheriff Pritchard had a way of filling quiet with his own echo. He walked slow, his spurs marking the beat, coat open to show the badge that caught what little sun was left. The townsfolk shifted, making space the way tall grass does for a passing snake. "Miguel Torres," the sheriff said, voice smooth as oil. "You helping this woman? Or claiming charity as a new business?" Miguel turned, steady as ever. Helping's free, last I heard. Same as decency. A few folks chuckled under their breath. Nervous sounds, more habit than humor. Catalina didn't look away from Pritchard. She stood straight, the breeze tugging her shawl, eyes dark as wet earth. "Sheriff," she said softly, "I came for window glass and salt. I didn't know I needed permission." "That's so?" Pritchard tipped his hat, slow and mocking. "Trouble is, Miss Vega, last time you brought your business here, half the town caught smoke from it. Best I can do is protect good people from misfortune following you around." Miguel's jaw ticked once. "Now, you calling her misfortune?" "I'm calling her what she is," Pritchard said. "A woman with a bad past and worse sense in company. Folks whisper Torres. I listen." "Then you need better company," Miguel said, voice low. Whitmore laughed softly, pretending to polish his spectacles again. Now, he said, "no need for temper. Just business talk." Catalina's breath came short, but her tone stayed cool. "Business talk shouldn't sound like a threat." Whitmore's smile didn't move. "The frontier's full of threats, Miss Vega. We just like ours polite." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Miguel placed the bundle of goods on the counter, coins on top. "That'll cover it," he said. "And that's all we owe." He lifted the sacks to his shoulder and stepped out. Catalina followed, head high, each stride measured. The bell over the door clanged once, sharp as gunfire. They didn't speak until the horses found the edge of town and the open land stretched wide again. The sky had turned thin and white, the sun just a pale coin behind clouds. "You didn't have to say it that way," she said finally. "I know," he said, "but you did." He nodded. "Habit. When a crowd leans wrong, I brace against it." She looked down at her hands on the reins. "You braced too hard." "Guess I did." They rode the rest of the way in silence, only the leather creak and crunch of snow between them. Back at the cabin, he unloaded supplies, stacked them by the door, then started a fire to thaw the chill off their bones. Catalina poured coffee, her movements slow, deliberate, like every clink of tin was a word she didn't want to say aloud. When he finally spoke, his voice was roughened with guilt. "I meant to shield you." "You did the opposite," she said. Her tone wasn't sharp, just tired. "You told them I was work, not a person." He looked at the flames, then at her face reflected in the tin pot. "You're right." Silence filled the space between them, thick as smoke. When she spoke again, her voice trembled just enough to make him flinch. "I've lived through fire and shame, Mr. Torres. Both burn the same. But at least fire leaves ash that wind can carry away." She turned then, walked out into the snow without coat or gloves. The door side shut behind her. Miguel stayed there, the fire licking high, until it hurt to breathe the warm air. Then he stood, grabbed his hat, and stepped into the cold. The sky was lowering, heavy with dusk, and her tracks cut clean toward the ridge. He followed, calling her name once, twice. The third time, his voice failed him. He found her sitting on a fallen log beneath the half-built roof beam they'd propped earlier. Her hands were raw red from the cold. She didn't look up. "I didn't mean," he began. "I know what you meant," she said. "You meant to stay clean in their eyes, to draw a line between my ruin and your reputation." He took off his hat, turned it in his hands like it might hold an answer. "I'm not proud of it." "Then be something better than proud," she said. He almost smiled. "Almost. You're a hard teacher. Only for lessons that matter." They sat there till light bled out of the day. When she finally rose, she looked at him and said, "You can keep your side of the line, Miguel. I'll manage mine." Then she walked back toward the house, her steps sure and slow, leaving prints he didn't dare follow. The wind shifted, bringing the smell of snow again. He looked at the cabin, half bright from the fire inside, half lost in shadow. By nightfall, he'd saddled his horse and gone home to his own ranch. Empty rooms and ghosts that never made a sound. 2 days passed. No smoke rose from Catalina's chimney. On the third morning, he rode out again, guilt spurring harder than hunger. The road was hard frozen, brittle under the hooves. At the creek crossing, he found a child's mitten caught in the reeds. Small, hand-knit, blue. Not hers. Someone had been near. At the ridge he saw them. 2 riders again, the same trail from before. Hoofprints near her gate, half covered by drift. He felt his stomach tighten. He spurred forward. The door to the cabin stood open, snow crusting the threshold. Inside, the stove was cold. Her tools leaned against the wall, untouched. On the table lay the book she'd been reading, its pages rippled from a spill. Then a voice behind him said, "Looking for someone, Torres?" Miguel turned fast. Sheriff Pritchard sat on his horse, hat low, smile thin. "Funny thing," the sheriff said. "A store clerk said that he saw you 2 riding home after your little visit. Now the lady's nowhere to be found." Miguel's hand brushed the butt of his revolver, but didn't lift it. "You accusing me of something?" "Not yet," Pritchard said, "but I got eyes, and they see trouble where you tend to ride." Miguel stepped closer, boots crunching on the frozen ground. "You best look somewhere else, Sheriff, 'cause if she's hurt, I'll bring her home, and anyone who stood by will answer for it." The sheriff's grin faltered for half a heartbeat. "Careful, cowboy. Law's got long ears." "Then it better learn to listen true," Miguel said and mounted up. He turned toward the foothills, where the wind carried faint tracks of hoof and fear. He didn't look back. By the time darkness came, the first flakes were falling again, soft as lies. The snow deepened through the night, swallowing tracks, muffling sound, making the world small as a whisper. Miguel followed what was left of the trail. 2 horses running heavy, 1 rider upright, the other sliding, slumping with the rhythm of someone half frozen or half fighting. He rode until the land rose into timber. The pines closed around him, black fingers raking the low clouds. Then through the gray blur, he saw the glint of metal, an abandoned lantern swinging from a branch. He dismounted, leading his horse by the reins. Beyond the next ridge, the trees opened into a small hollow where the wind had carved out quiet. There, a campfire burned weak and lonely. A thin figure crouched beside it. Catalina. Her shawl was torn, snow melting on her shoulders. She looked up when she heard him, but didn't flinch this time. "Followed the wrong trail," she said, voice scraped raw. "Whitmore's men came last night. Thought they'd scare me off the land. Said no woman should live alone in sight of their fences." Miguel's jaw tightened. "Did they hurt you?" "One tried." She showed him the bruise on her arm, dark like spilled ink. "The other lost his nerve when I took a shovel to his horse." He moved closer, checked her pulse, then draped his coat over her shoulders. "You did right. I did what I had to." Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "I spent years running from men who said they knew what was best for me. I'm done running." The wind swirled, shaking snow from the trees like dust from a rug. Miguel threw more wood on the fire, coaxing a stronger flame. "Storm's building again," he said. "You can't ride through it." "I don't plan to," she said, "but I won't crawl back to town either. Not after what they said." "You won't have to," he told her. They waited out the night, taking turns feeding the fire. When dawn came pale and brittle, he saw color in her face again. She looked tired, but alive, angry in a way that had backbone. They saddled up, leaving the hollow behind. The trail home was half buried, wind cutting sideways. Twice the horses stumbled, once the mule nearly went down. By the time the cabin appeared, a blur of gray against white, they were both shaking from cold. Inside, he stoked the stove until it roared. Catalina sat near it, fingers stretched toward the heat. For a long while, neither spoke. When she finally looked at him, her eyes carried something gentler than gratitude. "You didn't have to come." He shrugged, working at a frozen strap. "Couldn't sit still knowing you were out here. Because you pity me? Because I can't rest easy when good folks pay for other men's cowardice." She studied him, that scar on her face catching the firelight like a faint silver line. "You keep doing that," she said softly. "Doing what?" "Talking like I'm good, like I ain't been branded by the worst of what I've done or survived." He met her gaze. "Everyone's marked somehow. You just wear yours where the light can find it." Her breath hitched once. "Oh, you got a way of making pain sound like something holy." "Maybe pain is," he said. "Teaches us what kind of soul we carry." The room settled into quiet again. Outside, the wind keened through the cracks. Inside, the fire cracked and spat, steady as an old heartbeat. Hours passed before Catalina spoke again. "You should go before the sheriff comes sniffing around. They'll blame you for everything now. Let 'em." "Don't say that," she said sharply. "You know what men like Pritchard can do." Miguel stood across to the window, watched the snow chase itself across the plain. "I'm done bending to men who sell respect by the yard. I'll face 'em if I have to." She rose too, anger bright in her voice. "You'll get yourself killed." He turned then slow and calm. "If I stay quiet, I'll lose something worse." "What could be worse than dying?" "Letting fear turn me into one of them." Her hand fell open at her side, the fight draining away. "I don't want your ruin on my conscience." He smiled soft but sure. "Darling, you're the reason I remember I still got one." Outside, hooves crunched over the frozen ground. Both froze where they stood. A shadow moved past the window. Another followed. "Stay behind me," Miguel said. Catalina reached for the shotgun by the door. "Don't tell me to hide." He almost argued, then thought better. He loaded his revolver instead. The knock came. 2 quick raps. 1 pause, then a third. Miguel opened the door. Sheriff Pritchard stood there, snow on his hat brim, eyes narrow. Behind him loomed Whitmore, face red from wind or shame. Hard to tell. "Morning," Pritchard said. "We're looking for a runaway." 2 men claim she took a swing at him out near the timber. 2 men got off lucky, Miguel said. Pritchard's smile sharpened. "You sure she's here, Torres? Might be you're hiding her, aiding a fugitive. That'd make you guilty by law." Miguel's hand didn't leave the doorframe. "You talk law like it's a sermon, but you forget who's paying the preacher." Whitmore stepped forward. "You watch your tongue, cowboy. That woman's a danger. Only to men who think kindness is ownership." Catalina moved beside him then, rifle steady. "You've done enough talking," she said. "Leave." The sheriff's hand brushed his gun belt. "That's a poor choice, miss." Miguel spoke before the world could break. "Sheriff, you draw that iron, and you better mean to use it. 'Cause if you don't, I will." Silence held. The wind sighed. Even the stove crackle faded. Then Pritchard eased his coat closed, face hard as frost. "This ain't over," he said, turning his horse. Whitmore followed, muttering curses that froze before they reached the ground. Miguel shut the door. Catalina leaned her rifle against the wall, hands trembling. "They'll come back," she said, "then we'll be ready," he answered. But in his heart, he knew readiness wasn't enough. Something had shifted, something that would demand more than nails and courage. He looked at her, at the firelight tracing her face, and said softly, "Next time, we meet them in daylight." Outside, the wind began to rise again, carrying with it the promise of reckoning. They kept watch that night, like two tired soldiers who'd agreed not to sleep until the danger walked on. Miguel sat with his back to the stove, eyes on the door, and Catalina kept the rifle across her lap as if it were a steady thought. Outside, the storm learned new ways to batter the world, but inside the room, the flame held its little kingdom of light. Morning came thin and gray. Footprints showed again in the snow, careful and measured. Someone had walked and then turned, not bold enough to come up under the eaves. Pritchard left his mark of suspicion, and Whitmore left his brand of insult. But there were other prints as well, smaller, hurried, like a boy who'd run when asked to stay. Miguel watched them all, learning the story the way a man reads horseshoes. "We need folks," Miguel said, plain as a plow line. "If a few good ones come, Pritchard won't feel the courage to act foolish." Catalina looked at him, the firelight making a soft brown in her eyes. "You want to make allies out here?" she asked. "I want people who remember us as human," he said, "not as rumor." She considered that, fingers whirring the edge of a cup. "We have Samuel, and Miss Rosa down at the mill. Maybe even old Jacob. He hates Whitmore's face, but he hates bullies more." They wrote their little invitations in the form of knocks, visits, and couriered words. By noon, townfolk they'd only met at church or market came, drawn by the steadiness of Miguel's call and by the quiet force Catalina carried when she stood unafraid. Samuel arrived with a wagon full of wood and a slow smile. Miss Rosa brought stew that smelled like home. Jacob came, face craggy as a canyon, ready to stand where it counted. Whitmore and Pritchard watched from the street, the one with a ledger of grievances, the other with a badge wearing thin. But when families gather and set their shoulders as one, the sheriff's bluff becomes a feather blown off course. "You ain't fixin' this by yellin'," Whitmore spat aloud once, trying to rouse an argument like a man striking flint for a spark. Folks only shook their heads. Samuel put a hand on Whitmore's shoulder, soft and steady, and said, "We don't need your kind of help, Thomas. Leave the woman to her work." That was a small victory, yet real as bread. The crowd stayed. They helped reframe the story. People spoke of Catalina's chopping through winter, of Miguel's honest work on his land, of how kindness had been shown where gossip had once filled the air. Conversation settled like dust, and rumor found fewer hands to feed it. Still, Whitmore and Pritchard were nothing if not stubborn. They contrived a writ, a flimsy paper that would have meant little if not for the weight of threats tucked between the lines. Trespass, Pritchard called it, parroting the law like a preacher reciting a verse. But the law can be a crooked tree. It bends where folks allow. Miguel read the paper, eyes slow and sharp. Then he folded it and set it on the table like a dead thing. "We'll contest it," he said. "We'll bring witnesses to the court. Let Pritchard speak loud where the town can listen." That settled the sheriff's hands into uneasy pockets. Paper and ceremony had teeth, but so did truth delivered by a town that chose to stand. The hearing came a week later, in a church warmed by oak benches and the broad shoulders of those who believed in fairness. People filled the pews, neighbors, farmers, the miller, even a couple of men who used to trade jokes with Whitmore. The sheriff took the stand and recited his concerns, each sentence polished with intention. Whitmore gave testimony full of thin smiles and thin facts. Then Samuel spoke, voice old and steady. "I saw her work. I saw her save a life once by pulling a man from a creek. She's never asked anything but respect." Others followed. Jacob talked about Whitmore's long memory and short mercy. Miss Rosa told of how Catalina had once mended the apron of a woman who'd mocked her in public. When it was Catalina's turn, she walked to the front like the sun riding up slow. Her voice at first trembled, but it settled into something plain and honest. She told them about the night the lamp fell, about love gone bitter in a town that chose story over fact. She said the truth plainly, no flourish, no plea for pity. She said it in a voice that held the scar in its shadow and let the town see the human who bore it. Miguel sat and watched her. He felt small in a way he liked, the smallness of a man who'd found what mattered. When she finished, the church was quiet enough to hear a cowbell ring miles away. The mayor, a man known to weigh everything twice, cleared his throat and said what mattered most. "We learn by what we witness, not by what we whisper. This town owes a woman a kindness we withheld. The sheriff's warrant is void." Pritchard's jaw tightened, but he could not move the will of people who'd come forward. Whitmore's face lost a shade of color. Outside, snow melted into slushy honesty, as if the land itself had been taught to spill truth. They walked back to the cabin under an afternoon sun that felt like a benediction. Folks left with offers, windows to be fitted, rails to mend, wood to be stacked. Samuel lingered, looking after Catalina the way an old friend watches a favored horse. That night, by the stove, Miguel put his hand over hers without thinking. Her fingers closed, and she didn't pull away. Firelight traced the scar like a fine river. Miguel's voice came quiet and low. "I'm sorry," he said. "For the day, I tried to make you small." She gave a little laugh that was part sorrow and part relief. "You stood in front of people," she said. "That's more than many do." "It wasn't enough," he said. "It'll be more next time." She leaned her head toward him like a barn leaning on a post. "There don't need to be many next times," she said. "Just enough truth and hands that know how to work." Seasons shift slow in the country. Spring came the next year like a promise made true. The little house grew a real roof and a window that caught the dawn without shame. They planted a row of wildflowers along the path. Nothing fancy, just things that kept their color even when the wind tested them. On an afternoon when the hills wore green and the sky was a clean coin, Miguel took a small box from his pocket. He knelt in the dust by a patch of bloom, voice steady as a practiced prayer. "I don't have pretty things," he said. "I got honest ones. Will you stand with me? Not for show, not for whispers, but for the plain truth we plant every day. Catalina looked down at him, eyes bright with everything she kept safe. She laughed then, soft and wholehearted, and reached out, closing his fingers around the small metal ring like her hands had closed over a hammer for the first time. "Yes," she said, simple and true. "I'll take honest." They rose together. The town watched from porches and from behind curtains, not as judges but as neighbors who had seen wrong and tried to right it. The sheriff stayed home that day. Whitmore busied himself polishing spectacles that could no longer see clearly the lies he told. Years later, folks would still speak of the woman with the silver line on her face and the cowboy who would not let rumor be the story. They'd say it was a quiet sort of love, no trumpet, no parade, just slow afternoons, work done together, and a porch that always had room for one more chair. When the old cowboy tells it now, by a winter fire to any listener who'll sit a while, he ends the way a man does who's had a life with weight. We found plain truth was the thing that saved us. Not fancy, not speech, just honest hands.